Have former House Majority Leader Tom DeLay, former congressman, joining us on the phone. He is in town to speak at the Educational Policy Conference that's going on with the Constitutional Coalition. Congressman DeLay, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the air. I'd just love to get your reaction to the first week of President Donald Trump.
Well, I'm very impressed. I mean, to get all this done just in a few days, and the most important part, honoring his promises that he made in the campaign. I just find it, as a person that had to herd cats in the House of Representatives, for him to be able to feel the confidence of the American people and get out there and do the things that he's doing right now. It's just so refreshing. This leadership style, the leadership that he portrays, is exactly what people have been begging for the last 6 years.
They just didn't know it, or
right.
Some of them didn't know it. They seem shell shocked. Would you agree?
Yeah. Well, look, I think they're more shocked, not so much as he's honoring his campaign promises, but the side stuff. I mean, for him to take on the media, I've been wanting people to do that for 30 years. And for him to not allow the media to do all this fake news and make up stories and constantly trying to berate him and undermine his legitimacy as president of the United States, and he's not going to allow it. I mean, it's that kind of thing that we desperately have needed for many years.
Well, you've been one of the strongest, most outspoken conservatives that I can remember in the House, and
yeah,
I don't.
And where did that get me?
Well,
I got convicted of a law that doesn't even exist.
I don't know where you came down in the primary, or if you endorsed Trump early on, but for most conservatives, I mean, I was behind Ted Cruz for the longest time, and I really didn't know what to expect out of Donald Trump, but I'll have to admit that he's surprised me in a very good way so far. Well,
I think he's really onto something. I think he gets this from his branding of his name through his television show and the other things that he did. He really has a real feel for the people. Now, I don't agree with him on the trade stuff. But no, I was a Ted Cruz guy because Ted Cruz is to me the ultimate politician, because not only does he understand the Constitution, he memorized it.
Right, that's true, very true.
And I'm really big on putting God back into the public square and have a revolution for the Constitution. So Trump kind of worried me, but I'm very excited about where he is and where he's going. I've got some concerns. I don't know where he is on the LGBT movement. His daughter wants a new welfare program for daycare. He has said, and I hope he's changed, that he doesn't want to defund Planned Parenthood. There's just issues out there that I'm concerned about. But the thing that I think makes me more comfortable than anything is that Mike Pence is vice president, and he obviously has the year of Trump because Trump hasn't lived this politics, and I'm not sure he knows a lot about the Constitution, but Mike Pence does. And as long as he's listening to Mike Pence, I'm going to be comfortable.
Yeah, and I heard Ted Cruz say that the other day. Senator Cruz pointed out that what Donald Trump had managed to do was assemble one of the most conservative cabinets in a long time. That's promising.
That's very promising. When you're only as good as the people that are around you, and I found that out in 30-something years of politics. And I am just extremely impressed with the people around him. I have to say, I have a little concern over Rex Tillerson, but I think it'll work out.
Let me ask about your speech, your comments tonight you'll be giving to the Constitutional Coalition.
Well, it's basically about my book, Revival, Revolution, Rebirth. And my book is about putting God back into the public square. When you turn your back on God, this is what you get. And our whole system of government was founded on and predicated on God being on the throne and the core of our society. And God is the core of the Constitution, and the Constitution is the core of our government. And I'm calling for a revolution of the Constitution. And I'm going to talk about what does that mean.
Right.
What that means is if you start every day, as I did when I was serving in the Congress, with the question, is it constitutional, the country will be saved. And we've got, especially get those that are in the majority now, to understand that we have a federal government that is unconstitutional. It's ripped to shreds the whole spirit of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And we need to start turning the federal government back into a constitutional republic. And the only way you're going to do that is do things like eliminate the Department of Education. This whole repeal Obamacare and replace it. I don't mind replacing it, but that infers that the federal government has a constitutional authority to be involved in health care insurance, and it doesn't. And the reason we ought to be repealing Obamacare is that it's unconstitutional, and replace it with constitutional things. And so far, I'm very happy to see that members are looking at constitutional things like interstate commerce and other things as a way to get government out of the business of health care insurance and let the patient decide what's important to them.
Well, and the government's overstepped its bounds when it comes to the states for many years, and I don't know how that turns around.
Well, it turns around if the states will stand on the 10th Amendment and assert itself.
Right.
And now Texas has for the last few years, and I'm very proud of Texas constantly suing the federal government and winning in many cases. But on the other hand, Texas refuses to overturn lawless decisions by the Supreme Court. And what I'm calling for is for people to read Article 3 of the Constitution. They will find that the Supreme Court, there's a glaring omission in Article 3, and that is that there is no enforcement mechanism for Supreme Court rulings. And so Supreme Court rulings are only opinions if their opinions are enforced by the executive branch and or the legislative branch. And so when the Supreme Court does a lawless ruling like Obergefell and same-sex marriage licenses, the state of Texas should have stood up and invoked their own constitution that defines marriage as one man and one woman, and instructed county clerks in the state of Texas not to issue same-sex marriage licenses in defiance of the Supreme Court ruling.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading the book, Revival, Revolution, Rebirth. You can find it on Amazon. We're talking to former House Majority Leader Tom DeLay. Let me change the focus for a moment to the Supreme Court, because clearly filling Antonin Scalia's post is crucial. I had one of Phil Schlafly's sons on earlier this week discussing the three candidates that we're aware of, and where they stand on the pro-life issues and the Second Amendment, things like that. He was a big fan of Judge Hardiman. Do you have a horse in that race?
No, I really don't. Again, I'm going to go back to the Constitution. First of all, people need to realize that there is no Scalia seat. There's no vacancy. If you read Article 3 of the Constitution, you will find that the Supreme Court is the only court created by the Constitution. And guess what? There's no number of justices in the Constitution. Congress decides how many justices. Our first Supreme Court only had 6 justices. So we need to understand that the world will not end if we don't fill that seat. Now, what we do need to do is to fill it with a Scalia-type justice, obviously, if we're going to have 9 justices. I told people before the election, it doesn't matter if Hillary Clinton's there, as long as we have a Republican Senate that keeps the seat vacant, and maybe if Ginsburg leaves the court, not fill that one, then we have 7. I would rather have 7
than 9. Interesting.
Than 9.
Yeah, I'd never thought of it that way. But regardless, one of the focuses has been somebody who interprets the Constitution and doesn't try to rewrite it.
Exactly right. And President Trump promised us, in no uncertain terms, that he would appoint or nominate. He doesn't appoint. He nominates, and the Senate confirms. He nominates somebody that's a strict constitutionalist, and he's even said it, which excites me, a pro-life. I mean, you can't be a constitutionalist unless you are pro-life, because the Constitution answers the Declaration of Independence and that our rights we get from God, and one of those rights is life. And that life inside that mother has every right to the Constitution as anybody else. And to take that right away from the life away from that unborn child is violation of the Constitution. So we need, and I hope they have done their homework, because I hear some, rumblings in the background about William Pryor and some others. Gorsuch is a member of a St. John's Episcopal Church in Boulder that is extremely liberal. In fact, the pastor of that church went to the Women's March against Trump just last weekend. I mean, there's those kinds of things that makes you think, I don't know. Yeah,
I had not heard that. That's interesting information. Well, Tom DeLay, we appreciate you giving us some time today. I know that folks that are going to the EPC conference tonight are going to look forward to hearing your remarks. And, sir, it's always a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. You have a great day. That's former House Majority Leader Tom DeLay, who's in St. Louis today to speak at the Constitutional Coalition Conference that's going on. That's over at the Hilton St. Louis Frontenac, and I'm not sure if there's still tickets available or not, and it's been going on since yesterday. So you may have missed your opportunity, but I guess you can always check them out at epcconference.org and see what the availability